Welcome to the Emotional Mastery Podcast. Today I have Jana Roemer with me, and I am so excited. And my Leo is going to take over for just a minute, and I'm going to talk about myself and then throw it back to you. But I think it was like a year and a half, 2 years ago, I had somebody on the podcast, and she was talking about all these like emotional regulation techniques and tools that she had used. And she had mentioned yoga nidras. And because I was into astrology, she was like, you'd probably love these attuned to the moon yoga nidras because they, are talking about astrology and the moon cycles and things like that. So I immediately went, I signed up, and I literally still I do it like every single night. It just is I usually fall asleep with them though, which is I'm working on that. But and then I joined your astrology cohort last year, and just like the way you speak to astrology is like poetic. It's so beautiful. I just felt it like so like deep in my soul. And then at the end of last year, I was like, I wonder if you do any sort of mentorship, like coaching or something. Like I wanted to just like work with you on another level. And then you started talking about Healy. And it was like from the beginning, it's like full body, yes. But I'm an emotional authority in human design. So I waited and I waited. And then I said yes. And it has been like such a beautiful, beautiful experience. And just like having you here right now is like full circle. I mean, I'm pretty sure somewhere in my manifestation list for podcast guests, you were on there. So I'm just like so honored and grateful to have you here. And with all that being said, I'm going to pass it to you now for you to just, explain or, tell your story and any sort of defining moments that sort of got you to where you're at today.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I love those stories. It's one of those things you never know where we connect when you're working virtually like this. And I love that that's how it went. So I'll share mine in a little bit of a full circle moment as well. Because yeah, so astrology, yoga nidra, as you mentioned. And when I started doing the the Astro Nidras were born out of three things. One, I loved astrology. Two, I loved yoga nidra. And three, I was asking myself a question that was this question: how can I make enough money while doing as little as possible in order to be with my children? That was my question. And I was really at that time, well, he's 8, almost 9 now. He was 1, and I just couldn't fathom not being with him, and I wanted to maybe homeschool him, although he's not. He's super social little creature. We tried it. He likes to be in the schools. But that was the question. And it wasn't about like doing something cheap. It was about doing something that was like really potent, that I could pour myself into, that would bring together all of the things that I loved. And in my journaling of asking this question, I started to notice that when I did my yoga nidra practice, what I was journaling afterwards was alignment with what I was looking at in the stars when I went on to blogging, because I would do my personal journaling and then I would do my new moon, full moon blogs. And I just thought, holy smokes, I could create one practice, a lunar cycle, and see what happens. And the first one I published, I think I made like $200. And I was like, oh my gosh, really? Is this a thing that people want to do? I didn't think that anybody would actually want to do it, but the experimentation of an entrepreneur. And when I was doing astrology, one of the things that I started to get a little bit annoyed at, because I have a very scientific mind, was that there's no proof other than social proof or the way people resonated. But yet at the same time, when I was doing readings, people would finish, like after the reading, I would get feedback that was so consistent. I've never felt so seen. I feel so validated in my life. You talked about things that I've always felt, but were either afraid to admit, or the world told me I couldn't, or it didn't fit into the way society flows. I feel so much more empowered now to be me, and so there is some validity to this. But when I started to really get into, I've always been into the quantum conversation as well, with the mindset and all of that. But when I started to really dive into sacred geometry, it was actually through, and frequency, it was actually through astrology, looking at like the synodic cycles and Venus's path through the sky, and recognizing that, holy smoke, sacred geometry is embedded. Like astrology is mapped through sacred geometry. And all of this is frequency. And if there was somebody somewhere that could have some kind of device that could measure the frequency of the planets, we could start to validate what astrology really is. And I remember I was at a live conversation before everything was recorded and put on the internet. I mean, lots of things were, but not to the degree it is today. And somebody who was one of the researchers at the HeartMath Institute started to talk about the frequency of the planets and the frequency cycles. And, you know, it took the conversation of circadian rhythms and lunar cycles to a whole different level. And then my scientific mind started to get satiated that astrology could be more real. And then enter Healy. And we have a program called Natural Cycle that is going off the cycle of the earth, the moon, and the sun. And that was like a mic drop moment for me once I learned about this, because it's working with the Oregon clock and the cycle of the sun, moon, and the earth to attune us to our highest frequency, like our greatest health. And so this full circle of, wow, all of the things that I love and I've been obsessed with forever are all coming together in the one common language of frequency. And now I have a device that can like help me tune to the highest frequency within myself, you know? And I'm sure using yours, you've had times where you get the planets program. Have you had that come up yet?
I haven't, not yet.
Oh, it's sometimes when there's really hard transits in your chart,
Uh-huh.
planets will come up. And then I'll go and look at my astrology and it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, how do all these worlds come together? You know, the nervous system with the yoga nidra, the subconscious mind, you know, working in the subconscious mind, purifying your every layer of your being, and astrology, and tuning to the natural cycle of existence. Like, it's such an expansive place to dwell in contemplation and to journey through with awareness. And they all come together.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. My daughter is taking a summer school right now because she failed science. So she's taking summer classes. And she like texted me at school and she was like, Mom, I just had to watch a video and they said astrology is not scientifically proven. And I was like, hold on a second. But it's like the same thing. You know, I'm like, everybody that I talk to that I relay astrology to, they're like, how did you know that? You know, it's like they feel so seen. And I know that's what it did for me in my journey, you know, feeling so lost and confused of like who I was. When I realized that there was more than my sun sign, I was like, whoa, what is this thing? So I had to like go and like, I mean, it's a process, right? And I think like you can know it or study it for years and still not know everything. Like there are things that I learn now that I'm like, oh my gosh, it's mind blowing. But like to be able to tie it all together is so beautiful. And I haven't done the natural cycle. So this is I'm very like, I feel like I need more structure, but I'm very like chaotic, and a lot of like my human design and my astrology, there's just like a lot of like, maybe like a lack of structure. And I don't know if that's a shadow or whatever, but like the starting at like a certain time kind of throws me. So I'm like working my way to like find a way to do it in flow. But I need to like catch up on the videos and stuff like that. But that's just a little
that is one tricky thing about it. And actually I share that. I have a hard time. And when I was learning from Nuno Nino, who's the creator of that program, he said, don't get stressed if you miss one, just skip it. And then when it works, he was like, my things are coming up at 3 a.m. I don't want that. Because it's working with the Oregon clock, right? And he just said, just click next and then do it when it works, and then add notifications on your phone. And I have 0 notifications on my phone. That's the only one I have a notification for.
I have so many notifications. I need to tone them down a little bit.
Shut them off.
I've like so I got my Healy in February. I think it was the end of February. And just in my personal journey, I stopped drinking about 8.5 months ago. And so I've just felt like I've, you know, spent the last like 6 years just really working through my shadows and doing like a lot of the inner work. But I really truly feel like it's been like 2023 that I've gained so much momentum, like in my business and with the podcast and just like connecting with people and in so many ways. And, you know, I'm not saying Healy is the reason, but I think like it was able to take what was already done and sort of like, you know, bring it to the surface more and actually be able to take like that aligned action and not have, you know, the underlying anxiety around it, or, you know, just something that's subconsciously working that is just adding the extra like layer in there. And I don't know if I'm sure you have heard a lot of stories like that from people that it's just this beautiful support. And I don't know, it's hard to even like put into words like what it really does.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say, I mean, a lot of people have significant physical changes, especially people that have, chronic pain, or in Canada, it's certified as a medical device for fibromyalgia and arthritis and chronic pain and migraine. So in the US, it's not. So we have to be a little bit careful with how we speak of it. But there's a lot of people that they have significant physical changes. For me, I felt like my life force got sorted. When I got my Healy, I was in a phase of deconstruction. I was, the number one thing when I would think about my, what I was doing in my entrepreneurial world was burn it all down. Because that original dream of doing one thing and letting it be a really simplified, like a really simple, focused effort in order to provide myself more freedom, I moved very far away from that. And there were parts of my business that I really enjoyed and parts of my business that were completely collapsing me. And in the burn it all down moment, I actually burned down the thing that I love the most. And really interestingly, I had to burn it down in order to see what I actually didn't like in my business. And now I feel like the Healy has the coach module, so you can put in your goal and it interfaces with your subconscious mind and it gives you feedback like blocks and self-sabotaging or patterns of behavior or boundary issues, or and it will tell you where it's coming from, if it's ancestral or past life or from your parents or grandparents. It gives you all that information. And so my goal that I put in there was to be organized and in a free flow and inspired and creative. I can't remember exactly the thing. And as I was running this coach, I was miserable in life, for real. I was like, I'm doing all these things that are amazing, but there's something inside of it that I don't like. And as I, my emotional authority acting before waiting, I burned down the things I loved most, like I said. But then the coaching feedback started to get so much more specific. And now I can see all of the things that were adharmic, like against what I'm here to do. And where I'm going is stripping things all the way down to the most simplest thing again, like back to where I began, putting a really beautiful effort and space around creating a single Astro Nidra a month, like a lunar cycle. And like to create one high level meditation, it's not just like sitting down and recording a meditation. It's all of the prep work for myself, like being deep in my practice, deep in my listening, opening the channel, all the purification that has to happen for self in order to bring through the cleanest transmission, right? Because it's not me writing those. I open myself to receive it, and I'm a conduit to bring it through. And what I had created wasn't allowing me to get to that space. And so I like squished off the creativity and the inspiration, and I wasn't creating anymore. And the Healy really helped me to get there and see it through actual words and feedback, and then giving me the frequencies to align with the goal. And it was really amazing what kind of things would come up, like get called out on toxic habits and
Yeah.
It's kind of difficult to explain. I'm sure people that are listening are like, what are you even talking about? But it's difficult to explain what the Healy does because we've never seen anything like this before. This is a information field technology. So when I was still deep in the world of Yoga Nidra, what we're doing in the practice of Yoga Nidra is going underneath the analytical mind into the body as the ear to the universe in an Astro Nidra specifically. But that's really what we're doing. You think of all the masters that say the universe is alive inside of you. Everything that you need to know is within, the universe or the inner verse. the whole ocean is in a drop of water, all of these things. But there aren't really practices that help us to get there or in clear instructions. But Yoga Nidra, that's what it actually does. It inverts your attention from the outer world to the inner world in such a way that the inner world comes so alive that, as cheesy as this sounds, you can really access the secrets of the universe, right? By going in. And what Healy's doing is, and that field inside of you, that's the information field. Everything is information. Light is information, thought is information, emotion is information. The transmission from the planets, that's information. It's all information. So the information field is the empty space and the frequency inside that empty space. And so, having already spent decades in the information field as a practice, and then having now, I understand that a lot of people don't want to actually do the practice that takes you inward like that, the way that I did it, or lots of people do, but there's a lot of people that would rather take a pill or, go a shortcut. The Healy is almost like taking a pill, but not really. Like, you still have to get intentional and you still have to be in touch with yourself. And it works really well if you pair it with your sacred practices, because what it's doing is it's helping you to open up to the information field inside of yourself by extracting it and writing it down in words and showing it to you, right? And so, yeah, I don't know if that helped clarify what it's doing either.
Well, I have to say, and I know I shared with you or on Instagram, but like the one time that I did do the Yoga Nidra with the Healy, my experience was like beautiful. Like I don't know. It's hard to even like put into words, right? Because like I said, I usually will fall asleep. Granted, I'm always doing my Yoga Nidras sort of as a total body reset, like before bed. So maybe I just need to not do them before bed. But like you tell such like a beautiful, like coming into your body, like sort of story or like, meditation before it starts. And usually I'm just like, whoo, like that in itself, like gets me there. But to be able to actually witness my body go from that in between space, which I've always found it really difficult to be, right, for like my body to be asleep and my mind awake, because it's like when my body's asleep, everything else is just like that, we're done. Because I'm like go all day and I'm so tired, and it's just like a beautiful like nervous system reset. But to actually be able to come to that space, like to what you're speaking to now, where that information field is, and my experience, like I experienced anger within that space, and I was like, whoa, that's interesting, because I mean, this is my subconscious, right? And like witnessing it from this space, and how interesting that anger is what's in my subconscious, but it was just such a beautiful place to like finally be able to get to. And so now I want to like do more practices with the Healy. And I think just, my lights were on in my room and I wasn't like in the pitch black with a thing over my eyes. So, but yeah, I think that's just such a beautiful, like, urging.
And what you actually, can I take it a step further to what you shared about that anger with me?
Yeah.
Because what you actually shared was that you experienced anger for the first time, not paired with a lack of safety. So before that experience, every time you were experiencing anger, either within yourself or witnessing it another, it was associated with not being safe. But with you experiencing it inside of the practice of Yoga Nidra, where you were definitively safe in your body and in your heart and in your space that you were in, and you experienced anger without safety, it reprogrammed your relationship with anger. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's actually, that piece right there is really the gift of Yoga Nidra, because the significant difference between meditation and Yoga Nidra is, in Yoga Nidra, we say, bring it all in, feel it all. We're not trying to quiet the mind. We're not trying to, come into this place of equanimity. We're actually saying, whatever's alive in you right now, become aware, be a witness, feel it. And the design of the practice is such that we're working with the nervous system that brings you into a state of coherence so that you can feel what's alive inside of you. And a lot of people never experience, especially difficult emotions, but never experience emotions in isolation from each other. So there's associated emotions, associated thought forms, associated feelings that diminishes our ability to actually feel an emotion for what it is in its uniqueness. And so whether it's anger or resentment or fears or self-doubt or believing in yourself or trusting yourself or understanding your own competency or whatever is arising, you know, that is one of the most beautiful gifts of the practice of Yoga Nidra, because the inner world just says, I want you to see this right now. And because the nervous system capacity is grown in a way that allows for sustained presence without reactivity, to swim in the feeling, to feel the feeling, to allow the feeling, to witness the feeling move through your system. Where does it live? How does it move? What does it want to show? And sometimes everybody's different, but some people, when their eyes are closed and a feeling will come up, they'll get associated thoughts, or they'll get associated images, or they'll get associated sensations that come with it. And oftentimes when those associated experiences come up, that's part of the purging of a past experience that we might not even fully understand or remember. And then what comes next is the disintegration of history from our tissue.
That's amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
There's so much conversation about integrating, like integrating our trauma, but I actually am more interested right now in disintegration. Like disintegrate. I actually want it to disintegrate. And with Saturn in Pisces, we are in a phase where disintegration, we are being so supported. Karmically, right now, we are here to help disintegrate. Disintegrate history, disintegrate systems, disintegrate structure, disintegrate associations. And, you know, it's quite amazing. I could go on a big rampage right now, actually, about this time in Yoga Nidra. I don't know if you want that.
I mean, I'm all for it. I just want to say, like, what's really interesting, you mentioned like Saturn and Pisces and all this stuff. It, like the past week specifically, I've been feeling a lot of, you know, like I've been doing a lot of this inner work, and I've been feeling like energetically a lot of like quantum leaps and shifts and all things like that. But then this 3D, a lot of my triggers have been really being present in the past week. And I think like this ability, even with the Yoga Nidra, right? Like being able to understand that I'm safe to feel my anger, it's triggering me, but in a way that I'm sort of now able to be like, I'm feeling it in my body and I'm understanding where it's coming from and why I'm feeling this way, but also like not having to play into the, well, if you don't react this way, this means this about, you know, like the roles that I like traditionally played within that system. And because especially when it comes to family stuff, it's so hard to like make different choices, because it's like we were labeled XYZ from the day we were born. Right. And so when you act differently and people respond differently, I know I feel like a lot of shame of like, oh, well, I have to care about what everybody thinks. And I don't know. I'm like, I don't feel bad right now for like the way I'm sort of like moving through it. But it's interesting that that is like what's coming up right now. And it's like you said, Saturn and karma and all these things. It's like, if I'm going to be going to this new level, I have to release all those patternings that were coming before.
Yeah. Well, and last week, and while we're recording, we actually had Pluto opposite Mars and then Pluto opposite Venus, which are a huge personal planet relationship, how we fight, how we love, how we relate, you know, our desire, all of that. So, and Pluto is the planet of death, transformation, and rebirth, and it really helps us to understand our power. And so the fact that this is coming up for you during this time, while Saturn is also in Pisces, like you're sitting in such a beautiful opportunity to really create some quantum leaps and some pretty significant shifts in your first behavior recognition, and then repatterning responses. And really, I mean, that's some deep work right there.
Well, an Aquarius for me is in my 7th house. So I know we're about to dip back into Capricorn in the 6th, but like, I know it's going to be moving through my relationships. So I'm kind of like mentally preparing for it, but it's just interesting that like, even just at the start of this, that these themes are coming up.
Yeah. So that's the Pluto she's referring to that's in Aquarius and moving back to Capricorn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pluto doesn't mess around.
No, not at all. It's been pretty intense.
Yeah. It's interesting. I actually was sitting with a dear friend of mine the other day, who's always been like, I think we met 24 years ago, and he was older like about 10 years older than me, and was the first person who really made spirituality cool.
Mm.
You know, like I had like, my mom was always really spiritual, not religious, but spiritual. And then I had my own relationship with spirituality, but it was never something that I shared with my peers, you know? But when this guy and his partner came into my life, they were talking about spirituality and made it cool. Anyways, one of the things that we were speaking about is how even 5 years ago, when we talk about yoga philosophy or talk about where we are in the grand scheme of things, when looking at way bigger cycles, we used to talk about Kali Yuga, you know, this like dark time where it would like the activity on planet Earth would be more challenging, right? And then you talk, you know, a lot of the elders in different indigenous communities, they would talk about a quickening or the Great Awakening, not by today's conspiracy theory standards, but like this was language that was used in sacred circles prior to, like a quickening or an acceleration of awakening, and you know, like significant changes and the end times moving into new times. And then all of a sudden, once COVID came, we weren't allowed to talk about it the same way. But as I go deeper into the practice of Yoga Nidra, when we're talking about origin stories of Yoga Nidra, what it is Shiva, you know, in yoga philosophy, Shiva is, you know, the creator, the destroyer, the sustainer, you know, he's everything, like everything. Shiva goes and takes a nap. It's like the sleeping Shiva. And it happens during this dark time. And during this time, this sleeping Shiva is when Shiva goes and is napping, you know, it's like going through this big sleep phase in order to come back stronger. And when Shiva is sleeping, the world is getting darker. And I just thought like, wow. And if we mirror that, we go into this sleep. Yoga Nidra is conscious sleep or psychic sleep or awakened sleep in order to wake up to oneness, to source, to truth with a capital T. And so if we follow that model of behavior, like if that's the model, like to go and rest deeply, to tap into that place inside of you so that you can come back reborn and renewed and then create the new earth, it's no surprise that there's this renaissance of the practice of Yoga Nidra where quite literally we can look out and look at mass confusion. I mean, Neptune in Pisces has a lot to do with confusion, right? And no matter what your perspective of what is going on in the world right now, there's untrue information out there, right? Like there's intentional confusion, there's non-intentional confusion, there's like a lack of trust, like people don't know who to trust. I think that's more common than surety at this point, right? And so it's aligned with what the text said would be happening, right? But then we're like, oh, but we can't really talk about that right now, right? Like we're now all of a sudden like yoga philosophy isn't being shared in the same way as it was before. We're not like, it's not cool to talk about some of these things that, you know, 5, 10, 15 years ago, this was like the theme of my yoga classes, right? Or trainings. And now we're here and people don't want to talk about it. But if we are courageous enough to actually look at that and be like, okay, this was a planned divine timing of darkness, of forgetting, of confusion, of lack of clarity. And our job is to go inward instead of outward in order to restore that clarity. Then the practices like Yoga Nidra that take you out of the physical world and into the formless world, into the world beyond form, into the world beyond ego, into the world beyond matter, in order to connect with that thing that is so much greater than ourselves. Like that is, to me, there's something so special about that, right?
Do you think that's why people don't want to talk about it now? It's just like that need, the necessity to go inward?
I think people don't want to talk about it because there's so much cognitive dissonance right now. And it's a little bit scary, if we're honest. Like the world is a little bit scary right now because of the uncertainty and because of the unknown. I think that it's safer to I think it's safer to enjoy cognitive dissonance. I think it's safer to enjoy the escape. And there's nothing wrong with that either. You know, that I think that that's great. And even in the astrology with Saturn in Pisces, that is one of the things, like to escape, right? Like to go into fantasy, to go into dream. Like, what is the structure that you have around your dreaming world? What is the structure that you have around escapism? That's part of Saturn in Pisces. And so I think that's actually in many ways a really healthy coping mechanism, right? Because if we're too much in the fight all the time, or too much like seeking too much, it's heavy, right? And so and I also think that in any individual, forget about like the collective, in any individual's awakening, almost everybody that we talk to before they have their own awakening experience, what happens? They get confused, they get injured, they get lost. That's the nature of awakening, is to be confused, or to be hurt, or to be lost, or to be heartbroken, or to experience tragedy, or, you know, that's natural. But we're doing it en masse as a collective. There's no denying that the last 3 years has been collectively traumatic.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of people are only just starting to recognize that now.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think it's okay that people don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, it's understood.
Yeah. Me and my 3 Scorpio placements are like, let's talk.
Yeah, I know. I have Jupiter and Pisces in the 8th house, so I'm like always wanting to go deep with things. I'm like, I can never just keep it surface level.
I'm sorry, I just need to actually plug in my computer. I might have to switch my scene. I didn't realize that the plugin I was into is not actually working, but now my lighting's going to be way off. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, so sorry, you were saying you have what in your Jupiter in your...
Jupiter and Pisces in my 8th house.
So oh, amazing.
Like and then I have Pluto and Scorpio, which is a generational thing. But like, I feel like that's always, my moon's in my 12th, like all the, like the hidden stuff, you know, I'm like, I'm always like wanting to go there. And I'm just like so fascinated. I mean, especially with astrology, I feel like I'm really, really drawn to that like psychological aspect. I mean, like, it's just so amazing to me and so fascinating when you can like see inside, or just like trying to understand the way somebody works, right? And how they function. And I don't know, it's like the more I learn about my chart, or the more I learn about like my kids, my daughter's 13 tomorrow, and then my son is just about 7, and just like understanding the way they operate, you know, and like, I don't know, it's just wild. And it's just, I don't know. And even like that, being a parent and understanding it, so supportive. And, you know, my son, has a Scorpio rising, Mars and Saturn in the 1st house in Scorpio. And so like his anger and his passion and intensity is like there for everybody to see. Like, you cannot hide that. Right. So I'm like, to be able to know that and be like, scrapper. Oh my gosh, like all the time. And then his son he's got like a stellium in the 8th house. Right. So I'm like, it's crazy. Right. But to be able to see that and be like, okay, I understand your anger and you're absolutely valid for like everything that you're feeling. But like, can we have a conversation, or just trying to find different ways and just being like, go to your room, don't do that, you know? So I don't know.
He's here to transform. Anybody that comes into contact with him is going to be forced to transform. That's his life's work, is transformation.
Oh yeah. And he triggers a lot of, and even in the family, like him and my daughter, they just like fight all the time. And I just see it play out. And especially with human design, those dynamics too. And I'm like, you guys are, and I know that they chose each other as much as they chose me.
Right.
You know, so I'm like, you're triggering the hell out of each other, and but it's going to be for your best good, like at the end of the day. So I'm just like trying, find my peace within it. Cause sometimes I'm just like, oh my God, you guys got to stop. But
separate corners.
I know. Right.
Except for you don't do that. I know. It's wild. Well, I've got 2 Scorpio boys. So my little Augie, he's a Scorpio, Sun, Moon, Mercury, and Venus. So true stellium in the 3rd house. So he's got to talk about everything too. And then my other little guy, he's a Scorpio with a Pisces moon. And a Gemini rising. So we have all this Gemini energy along with all this transformational energy. Really sensitive little guys.
That's it. My daughter's a Gemini sun and my son's a Gemini moon. So they also have that Gemini thing too. That's so interesting. Yeah. It's just, it's so powerful. I would
think about the power of that. Sorry.
Go on.
Think about the power of that not only are they having access to the world beyond form, and like they see through the veil. They're very piercing characters. But because the Gemini in both of our kids, and the third house in mine, that they'll be able to talk about it, which is really unique, because a lot of people that feel and see at such a deep level have a hard time communicating about it. Look at our little change makers here.
I
What are they
know,
gonna do,
right? I
right?
know. I love it too, because especially like with my son, like the other day, he got so mad. We were out in public and he did something. I can't remember what it was. And so I got mad at him. He loves it. Well, not, he just doesn't, he's learning, right? So he loves to project what he likes to project it on you, like as if you did something wrong. He didn't do anything wrong. You did, right?
Yeah.
So he like started to run away. And I was like, get back here. And he like turns around and he was just like, I just really don't want to be near you right now. And I'm like, thank you for telling me. Like, I absolutely appreciate that. But also, we're in public, so you can't be running off in the middle of the street, like, so, but the ability to communicate that instead of just like, I don't know, being destructive or some other ways, like you said, it's just, that's really powerful to be able to like talk about all that depth.
Yeah. And we just got to keep them talking.
Yeah. That's what I try and do. I'm like always, even afterwards, I'm like, what were you feeling? How was, just trying to understand like where he's coming from so that he feels valid, because I think that especially a lot of Scorpio is very, very private, right? And secretive. And if you're not expressing it, but again, that Mars in the first, I think it's like on his ascendant. So I'm like,
wow, good for
there's
him.
no way. Yeah. But I would love to go back. So I had like a couple questions about like the coaching app specifically. Sure. So like, as you're running these, what I found really interesting, I was trying to be like super specific with my intention, like putting numbers in there and stuff like that. And it was, as soon as I like shifted that to just have a more fluid like intention, things just started moving. It was like removing like the timestamps and this and the numbers and all that, just for me personally. But how do you work with like all of the feedback that comes through? Like, are you journaling on it? Are you like reflecting? Are you reading it as it's running? How does that work for you?
Okay, so what she's referring to, if anybody hasn't experienced Healy, is when you put in your goal, it gives you actual information back, like I was mentioning before, and it comes in the form of statements. So here's the desired state, and here's, this is what you're working through. So, and it also tells you how deep it's in the subconscious mind. So how close it is to your conscious mind and how deep it is in your subconscious mind. And that's the first thing I look at when I'm working with it. So I'll reorganize it and I'll look at all the stuff that's closer to my conscious mind. So an 8. And I'll work with that stuff first. And I'll actually do things in my physical world to remind me of the thing that I'm working through. So for example, when I first started using it, it was calling me out at the level of distraction that I was allowing in my life. It was like the number one thing, like 98% relevancy, 8 as in like it's very forward in your conscious mind, was motivational disorder, distracting out. And so what I actually did is I changed my workspace. So now I actually don't work in my office. So I keep my office organized. And then when I'm ending my day, I put everything away except for what I need for my biggest task the next day. So I'm prioritizing the most important thing to get done. And then I actually take only the things that I need and I go sit somewhere else in my house that is clean and distraction free. And then I leave my phone in my office until that task is done. Right. And then I noticed that it's not just that, I have micro distractions. So I'm actually going to make a reel about this. I started to notice, okay, so how long do I work before I distract out? And it was really, really short. I'm embarrassed to say like how short it was, like how quickly I would like go to grab for my phone or food or something, or like, go off of the task that I was doing. And I brought my phone back in, but with a timer. And I was like, okay, 5 minutes. You're not allowed to distract for 5 minutes. And then when I was getting through 5 minutes without distraction, I was like, okay, 7 minutes. And you'd think I'd go to 10. No, I went to 7 because the urge, like the animal of my body was so habituated to avoid and move away from what I was doing that I needed an accountability. Like I needed really hard discipline to just get my body to stay present with the thing that I was doing. And again, I was trying to do tasks that I did not want to do. Like every part of my soul was like, do not do this thing anymore. But in the process of doing it, that's when I was putting in the goal of my life being more organized and flowing with ease and being filled with inspiration and creativity. And those things had to get done, but then I had to change the structure of what I was doing so that those things weren't being repeated in my business. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so then that's one way, actually physically setting myself up. Now, distraction doesn't come up anymore. I can actually sit for like an hour and a half and like stay on task.
Hmm.
It's a big deal in this world. We have so many people self-diagnosing with ADD or ADHD. And I think that it has to do with scrolling. I think scrolling is ruining our brains. And so I had to train myself out of that like fast moving information, because my mind couldn't stick on information for a long time, or it couldn't stick to a task. So that was one of my that was an idea that came out of seeing that information from the coach feedback. And now actually I really like that habit of closing everything down, putting all the books back on the shelf, like even the notes and the, now I'm using Notion, which is a beautiful organizing, but so I changed things in my life as a result of it. Other things, I journal. So if it's, like my school, my Yoga Nidra school is called Practices of Self-Love. And when the coach was coming up with being better at loving myself, I was like, but I thought I was doing really good at this whole self-love thing. And so I do actually feel a lot of self-love. I do have a self-respect, and I believe in myself. And those are things that I've put a lot of effort to get there, because there was a time in my life when I looked in the mirror with hatred, and now I look in the mirror with like respect and love and trust. So when it was coming up and repeatedly coming up, I was like, okay, I got to pay attention to this. But what was interesting is it was coming up as ancestral. So it's deep in my DNA. And so that was a journaling piece. And one of the things in my ancestral line is that my grandmother, we knew her as, she would say that she's a Laplander. And in today's world, that's not a language that we can use, but that was, that's just what she would say. And so then I started to like really go into feeling my grandmother. And so today she's Sami. So that is indigenous of Scandinavia, Finland, it's Sweden, Norway. So she was Norwegian and Swedish, Sami. And when I'd feel into my grandmother, when she wasn't celebrating who she was as a Sami woman, like she came into, a family and a life where, being white is a better choice. Right. And so even the way that it got passed down into my family, there's some parts of my family that embrace and accept that ancestry. And it's not even that far back. This is my grandmother.
Yeah.
You look at pictures of her and it's like, yes, she is an indigenous woman, and just feeling into that. And I was like, okay, this is actually the part that I need to love more and embrace more and like learn more about. And, and as I went deeper into that, it stopped showing up in the same way. And so it's a cool little treasure hunt, what it gives you, like the information that it gives you. And then I actually had a really interesting one come up the other day. I got into a bit of a argument, maybe not argument. I unintentionally really hurt somebody. I didn't mean to. I unintentionally hurt somebody. I didn't know that the words that I was choosing were the exact words of their wound, right? And the way that it went down, I saw my innocence, but I also saw how hurt they were. But also in the process of this, the way that I was treated, I got angry. And so I put into my coach, I forgive, and I put the person's name. And the number one thing that came up was that I was under psychic attack, that there was somebody wishing ill will on me. And I was blown away by this. I was like, holy smokes, like this thing can tell that there are And when I brought it to this person, I said, I can feel the daggers that you're throwing at me, and it doesn't feel good. I would like to communicate, because I think if we could talk, we would be able to move through this and both grow. And their response was, there's no daggers. And so I was like, okay, so we're not going to get anywhere. The thing doesn't lie. Like, there's clearly, you know, but in their emotional process, you can see how innocent that would also happen, right? Like, somebody's upset and they're like, oh, I wish they would go away, or, you know, whatever it is. And so then I actually used other programs in the soul cycle programs. There's one called Aura Peer, and that started scanning. And I was like, oh, it wants me to purify my aura. Okay, cool. So then I was, you know, using general protection and Aura Peer, and it helped me to figure out other programs that I could use. And I kept running I Forgive This Person in my coach. And just yesterday, they finally agreed to talk to me again. You know, and so yeah, like it's vast, like how you can, I mean, just look at the 3 examples that I use, like my own mind and the distracted nature of my mind, my own lineage, and really learning to love myself on a deep, deep level, like a part of myself that's essentially invisible. And then like interrelationship. I've even done with my, you know, every marriage has moments, and my husband and I, a little spat, I'll like write in the coach that we get along and come into resolution and are back in a loving place. And it's amazing, the insights, because when we fight with somebody, we actually want to point the finger at somebody else. That's nature. But when I put in squabbles with my husband or something, it's me. And I always want to make it his fault. That's what we do. And so it's been really good for me to be like, oh, this is you bringing in the pattern of, you know, unworthiness, or right. And then I can look at that, and then I can own my side of the argument better, and I can come back to him instead of waiting for him to come to me and say, damn, I noticed that I'm being triggered. This is my pattern. And this comes up because I'm afraid of, and I love you so much. And I just want to, you know what I mean? So it helps to guide me back to my higher self. And then the alchemical nature of owning my own shadow in a tumultuous moment that's life-changing. It's huge.
I've never thought to like put something like I forgive so-and-so like within the coaching. I'm like, literally, I'm like, wow, I think I'm going to definitely, just in the situations that I'm experiencing in my life right now that are triggering me, you know, I'm like always trying to like work it out like with my own head and just like come back to myself, which I think of course are like powerful tools, but then to have something like Healy that you can actually put and like have these statements, because like you said, it's wild the accuracy of what they come up. Like I had, I run a program, it's Holistic Human Design. And one of the girls in there, I was putting an intention for her and we were just sort of going through it. And something came up that made no sense. I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to you. And she didn't really say anything in the moment, but like a couple of days later, she was like, I knew exactly what that was about. Like, cause it was just like one word, right? That was just like, that's weird. But like, but she knew exactly. And she, you know, after 36 hours, she was like, the changes, the shifts in my energy are wild. Right. And so, yeah, it's just, it's so profound. And how do you, so like you have your one, so you have like your business, you know, you said organization and flow. And then when you're putting up these other little ones in, how often are you running those as opposed to the other one?
It depends. So I have 2 that I run fairly consistently that are bigger goals. And then as things come up and I know that I'm in my confusion state or I'm not seeing myself clearly, I'll put them in because it gives such valuable feedback. Other things, like right now, my husband and I are trying to get a home swap. We live in Nelson, BC, Canada, which is a very difficult place to move into because it's in a mountain, like where mountain ranges converge on a lake. So there's only so much land to build homes on, but it's a very desirable place to live. It's like lots of organic farmers and really foodie, and there's a ski hill and there's lakes and there's mountains. Like it's an amazing place to live. But we want to go spend some time back down in Venice Beach because my husband's company, he's having to travel there quite a bit. And we know there's this pocket of time, like 6 months, where he's going to have to be there a lot. And I'm like, let's just go. And we looked at rents for like, oh God, that is way too expensive. Like we can't afford to live there right now. And then I was like, what if we did a home swap? Like we live in a desirable place. Venice is a desirable place. And we'd be willing to go, you know, around that area on the west side of LA. And so I started to put that into my coach. And so when that then comes to be, I'll stop putting it in my coach. But what was really interesting with that one is I had 25% of the information pieces back were all ancestral, and they were all supportive. And I was like, Mark, our ancestors are here to help us get back down there for this time. Like it was kind of wild, because both of us have a practice of calling in invisible support, and then to see it in like reflected in the feedback from the coach, I was like, read this. This is legit. Like, this is our ancestors being like, we got you, we're helping you, keep putting the word out, let people know you've got a great place, you want a home swap.
That's amazing. Does he use the Healy, like coaching too?
He does. He uses it for everything. And he has found himself at like the epicenter of his industry right now. Like although, I mean, he's in the minutia, in the like build phase of what he's doing, and anybody in the minutia, they can't see the big picture, but he uses it to help him feel confident in meetings and to close deals. You know, like he uses it, he primarily uses it for meetings. Like, I show up confident, the answers are clear, you know, like I'm portraying the vision clearly. You know, it's important when you're using the coach to use it on yourself. Do you get what I mean? Like, it's not, I didn't put she forgives me. I put I forgive her. And so for him, it's like, I'm communicating clearly. I'm confident in my knowing, not they will sign on with me. It's I'm this, because we don't want to be using it as like I don't know if it would even work that way, but we're not trying to use it to manipulate. We're trying to use it to align and magnetize, right?
To be within your own energy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I love it. I feel like the anxiety, like relief that in my own practice of using it has been just crazy, because I'm usually, I mean, but I'm like constantly anxious, but anxiety, of course, so many of us experience anxiety for so many reasons. I know, like it was April's new moon, and everything was 29 degrees of Aries, and my North Node is 29 degrees of Aries. And I was like launched into this like 3-day, like chaotic, depressive, like it was just one of those, I mean, from an emotional authority, I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to get out of this, but I just like centered myself, and I ran the Healy, the emotional well-being, like a few times. And I mean, it wasn't like I ran it once and I was like, huh, I'm all better. But like just the ability to kind of come back to myself, and the speed at which I pulled through that, as opposed to like in the past, you know, it lasting like a week or 2 weeks. Like this was just sort of like a 3-day, really deep low, but like having that support was just, I mean, there's just so many ways that this device is just absolutely beautiful. Like,
it's a real buddy to have. Like, it is an incredible. I was listening to a book on tape the other day, and it was about a book on tape. Now I'm aging myself. I was listening to audiobook. Okay. I was listening to audiobook, and the person was talking about nutrients, and they were talking about how like carrots, for example, their job is to seek particular nutrients and vitamins and minerals from the soil and bring them into a form that we can then consume, because we are of the earth. And so it's really like fruits and vegetables and plants are really like a vehicle of bringing the earth into our bodies, right? It's kind of a cool way to think about it. Like, we know that we need the minerals of the earth in our bodies, but we can't eat the soil. So the plants go and they get the stuff that we need, and then we eat it. So it's like a translator, essentially, like the food is a vehicle or translating system. And I had this realization, I'm like, that's what the Healy is for our spiritual self, for our mental self, for our emotional self. Although it does work on the physical body as well. For me, in my experience, it has been so much about my state of mind, the quality of my nervous system, my ability to metabolize my emotions, my ability to see clearly. And I was just like, that's what this is. We need food to bring the earth into our bodies, and we would not sustain ourselves that long if we didn't have that. And we need spirituality to sustain ourselves. And we can get spirituality, I mean, we are spirit, and we can get there on our own, but then we can use this device. This is an information field technology to bring us deeper into connection with source energy. Like, that's, I mean, it's the vehicle, it's the translator of source, because the language of creation is frequency.
And like even food is energy, right? It's frequency.
Is
And I know
information.
like the app in there has all the digital. I haven't like really played too much with that.
Mm,
Like the nutrients and things like that. And
digital nutrition.
but it's just, yeah, it's really interesting because it's, you know, once it gets in your body, it's all, that's what it is, right? Everything around you is energy and frequency.
Everything.
Yeah. That's
Once
what it's
people
all made
get
of.
that,
Yeah.
yeah. Once people get that, I mean, I think when Marcus Schmieke is the gentleman that invented this, he started studying quantum physics when he was 16 based off of pure interest on his own. He just explained, he said one thing that just made so much sense to me. He said, quantum physicists, no matter how far they look out into the universe or how deeply they look into a single cell, the common language in all things is frequency. And so the deeper you go into matter, what you find is space. And the same relationship between form and matter in a cell, like the space between the matter is like looking up at the stars and the space between the stars, right? And the common language is frequency, and it is the one language that never needs to be translated across any species, any plant, any planet. Like it's all the same. It's frequency. And that I was like, oh yeah. And if you understand the one language that everything in existence speaks, if you understand that language, you actually understand creation. It's the language of source. Frequency is the language of creation. And then we have this little device that speaks that language to us, and its whole system is designed to align us with source energy. That's what it's doing. So it's aligning, helping you align with purpose. It's helping you align with optimal wellness. It's, like that's when, if people can really get that, I think that understanding the actual like ins and outs of the science is less relevant, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, this is an attunement tool to my highest and best self.
Yeah. When I love like when you shared about your download during the yoga nidra when you were using the mag Healy, and just being it brings you there and then you take over, you know, like you as a frequency and you as a human, your energy takes over. And I was like, yeah, like it just made so much sense. Like I like felt that. It's like
Yeah.
it's exactly what it is.
Well, yeah, and I was so reverent to my yoga nidra practice. I was like, I'm not bringing Healy in there. No way. No way. I could do this on my own. I'm not bringing something in like little snobby purist. And then it was like a unintentional. The sleep atmosphere program was on the mag, and I needed to actually stay awake because the kitchen was dirty. I wasn't waking up with a messy kitchen, but I wanted everybody to go to sleep in the house. And so I had it running, and I was like, okay. And I went into, eyes closed, laying down, allowing my body to fall asleep while remaining aware, which is the practice of yoga nidra. And then I asked the frequencies, I asked the Healy, or I asked the frequencies to show me how they're working in my body. So I asked what I really did is I asked my body to show me how the frequency is interacting with my body. And I was guided to be paying attention to different parts just by sensation, like I was like, oh, it's in, my brain is being affected. Okay. So I did this like really in-depth brain scan. And I went into a really profound experience of coherence because I ended up going into my heart and just like flash of white. And all of a sudden I'm in my heart field. And anybody who's done plant medicine or like a mystical, it was like that, it was like I was in an altered state. It was so beautiful. And I could ask anything I wanted in that place. And I was in a dialogue with the consciousness of the frequencies. And it was so clear that this device only helps you to get there. But once you're there, it was no longer the Healy that was involved in that, because it got me there. And because of, decades long practice, I was able to sustain that and be there with it. And it was me in source. It wasn't me and Healy in source. It was like the Healy was like, I don't need to be here anymore. You're the frequency device. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like you said, I mean, frequency is source, right? So it's like that. Yeah. That's beautiful.
And that's
And
why we're doing yoga nidra, is we're
yeah.
trying to, the oneness, right? That's right. You have to.
No, I was going to say, I want to respect your time too, but I have another question about just
Sure.
like the Healy and astrology. Like, if I know we talked a little bit about like Saturn and Pisces and Pluto, but like, is there like, what is the astrology specifically saying about like technologies like these that are coming forward?
Yeah, there's a few different things. So winter solstice of 2020, Saturn and Jupiter were conjunct at 0 degrees of Aquarius. And Saturn and Jupiter conjunct every 19, almost 20 years. This is a cycle that happens forever. That's the cycle of them. It's predictable, it's patterned. And what happens is for 200 years, it will happen in the same elemental signs continually for 200 years. At the end of a 200-year phase, it will move into the next element. It will go back into the last element. So it was Earth for 200 years. And then in the early 80s, it had one in Libra. And then it went back into an Earth sign. And then it went back into a Capricorn. And then it went into Aquarius. And now we've got 200 years of the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction happening in air signs. Now, okay, so that's the like thing. Saturn and Jupiter are the planets that help us understand our karma and what we're working through karmically, and our highest lessons, and what we're evolving into, what we're growing into. And so for the last 200 years, it's been in Earth. So it's like physical body, the industrial revolution, like, everything has to do with matter. Look how materialistic culture is, right? Like that's where we are. Now it's happening in air signs. So it's about information. It's about energy. It's about the intellect. It's about what's beyond the intellect, what's beyond the ego. And so this is information field technology. And it's interesting that during the same period, so the 80s till now, where we're transitioning from physical to material, in the 80s is when they realized that the brain is plastic. In the 80s is when we started to move from the analog world into the digital world. The computers were invented, and all the, like during that time, we transitioned very much from the physical world to the invisible world. Like you and I are sitting in different countries right now, and we're able to have a live conversation, and that information is moving that quickly. And as we understand ourselves more as information fields that happen to cluster together matter instead of matter, like we're inverting our understanding. That's a big piece. And new technology. So Pluto, like you were mentioning, Aquarius is where things are. Aquarius is the innovator and the inventor. It's the scientist. It's ruled by Uranus. Uranus is in Taurus, which is the physical body and the earth. And so we're inventing things that are going to impact our physical body and our relationship with the earth. And I mean, there's so much more to it than that. But, like you said, food is information. If we see food as information instead of food as matter, that changes our relationship with food. What kind of information do I want to put into my body? Right. But it's all the inputs of information. And we see other technologies that are technology interfacing with the body, like, my God, look at Neuralink, things like this. These are real things that are happening. We also have the most incredible technologies where you can put technology in the body of somebody who has been unable to see their whole life, being able to see for the first time. This is all very aligned with the astrology right now. Innovations in technology in the body, like this is it. What I love about the Healy is that it's outside of you, where Neuralink goes inside of you. Now I'm not in control of it anymore. The keeper of the power button on that thing is in control. The programmer of that Neuralink is in control. And it's influencing your mind in the way that you think. This is outside of me. I can turn it on and off, right? And then on top of that, Saturn in Pisces is Saturn can't help but build structure and form. And so it's actually building structure and form in the invisible realm, which is what this is doing. This is building invisible structure for us to align with, to come into resonance. Like it's very much aligned. It's very much aligned.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see how the world adopts all these different technologies. Like, I think that if I was unable to see and I could have some kind of device installed in me that I could see again, I would be lining up for that. I don't think I would hesitate. I think that I would be doing whatever it would take to receive that. Am I doing the same with Neuralink? No. Right? Like, do I want to put a chip in my head that gives me access to Google all the time? No, I don't. I actually don't, because we also, with Pluto going into Aquarius, Pluto brings out all the underbelly or the underworld of the area that it's going into. So at the same time that we're seeing, I mean, the world that is going to exist in 10 years from now isn't a part of our imagination yet. It is some people's imagination, but it's not everybody's. There's people that when we talk about things like Neuralink, or we talk about things like the impact of AI, there's no room. People talking about, changing the money system. There's no room for that possibility to even exist in a lot of people's minds. In other people, money's already dead, right? We're already moving on to different forms of trade. So that what's going to happen with Pluto and Aquarius once it's there for the next, I think it's 2044, is not only are we going to see the emergence of new technologies, but we're also going to see the shadow side of that. And, Pluto was just in Capricorn, and we saw the shadow side of government. Capricorn rules government, authority, systems, and structure. What happened? The exposure and the huge conversation of systemic racism and, like real things, corruption in government, because Pluto in there exposes the underbelly of what it is. So simultaneously, we're going to see the underbelly of tech and innovation, and and so one of the things that I really love about Healy is the origin story and who's behind it. They have the purest intention. This guy was a Vedic monk for 12 years. When he was initiated into this world of quantum physics, he was made to promise that he would only use this information for good. He would only use this technology for good, and not to say that, we don't know anything definitively, but I have more trust in this than I do in, who knows what Elon Musk is up to? I don't know, right? So it's something for us to be thinking about when we're engaging with new technologies, and how we're engaging with AI, and how we're engaging with how the world is changing in such a significant way. And, call me a conspiracy theorist, but if there's a frequency technology that can come in and influence us for good, there's also frequency technology out there that can influence us in a more manipulative way. And with the Meg Healy, which is different than the one with the coach, and it's casting an atmosphere of coherence or chakra balancing, or, there's electrosensitivity, so it can, clear EMFs. I like having this in my home, because now I'm actually setting what frequency is in my home. So if there's other technologies that are maybe sending not so helpful frequencies into my space, I have my defense mechanism of no, I'm choosing to set the frequency here now. And so it is something for us to think about. If the information field is having a way bigger influence on us than form and matter, I really want to know the influences of my information field and what kind of support systems I can have for my information field, so that I'm supported, I'm empowered, I'm protected, I'm guided. I want to keep all of that. I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit of a deviation, but
no, somebody showed me not long ago this, it was on YouTube, but they're creating this robot essentially that can build things and for fighting, right? So it's going to be for military use. And I was like, whoa,
right.
That's going to a dark place. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's where my mind went. But so of course, there's always these beautiful devices, and then things like that are just a little bit scary. But I think that's also where it's so important right now to come into your body and to just come back to yourself, and come into source, and have these frequencies that are supporting you to get there, so that we're not coming from this space of fear constantly.
Yes.
To sort of center in and be like, okay, I can trust, recreating my own reality and things like that is really supportive for the individual and also the collective.
Yeah. And what you just said is so key. Come into your body. That is the key to life right now. And Jupiter is in Taurus, right? And Jupiter is going to conjunct Uranus in Taurus. And we have had this massive conversation move into the collective, at least in the Western world, of embodiment and nervous system regulation, emotional regulation, all of these, somatic therapy, all of these things where we're moving into and being educated en masse has to do with being in your body. And anybody who's in their body, they know their body's their compass, right? Like when I want to know what's a yes and what's a no, I'm not going in my head. I'm not going into chat rooms. I'm not going into like getting advice from other people. I'm going into my body, and my body is telling me the truth. And you want to know why? Because you're feeling the frequency of your body.
Mm-hmm.
And the more, the better. And again, why I love Yoga Nidra is you can do practices. One of the key parts of it is pairs of opposites. And so if you practice, what does a yes feel like in my body? What does a no feel like in my body? In that place, what we talked about in the very beginning about where you felt anger without fear, or anger in an environment of safety, and you really feel anger. Same thing. You go into the practice of Yoga Nidra and you feel a yes without interference, and you feel a no without interference, and you start to be able to recognize what a yes and what a no feels like in your body. Then you're in the world and you have to choose, am I going to go this way or am I going to go that way? You go in and you feel your body and you get a clear yes. Okay, this is the way I'm going. And the more we have people doing that, this is when Saturn was in Capricorn and Aquarius, I feel like that was a big part of the onboarding for us as a collective karmically is, where are you with authority? Is it internal or external? And what are you doing to strengthen your inner authority? Right. And we're just going a layer deeper with Saturn in Pisces with that as well. So don't worry if you weren't on that then, you still have time. Right?
Yeah.
But it's so important that embodiment, I think the embodiment piece is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Like we're not using technology to bypass the body. We're using technology to go deeper into the body. I'm not using technology to bypass my meditation practice or my Yoga Nidra practice. I'm using it to go deeper into it. Right?
Yeah.
And then can I take a break from the technology and get there on my own? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so important. And so much of like what I teach too as well is being within that body and understanding your emotions and being able to understand what that yes is and what a no is. Right. And even in my own practice, like with human design, I took like a year off because I needed to be embodied in myself, separate from the modality, that then I can come back in and integrate it in such a beautiful, powerful way because I trust myself so much more. Because I think with so many things, it can become the thing, right? And we do lose ourselves to the device or to the modality. So yeah, I think that's just so important right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I still do the majority of my practices without Healy in Yoga Nidra, but I love when I do it with Yoga Nidra because it's like, it's a deepening of the practice. You know, one of my teachers has been Ram Dass, and Ram Dass, you know, he used LSD as a vehicle to awaken consciousness. And I went and sat with him on the 40th anniversary of his book, Be Here Now. And he's not talking about LSD anymore, you know, that's not that, well, he's passed on now, but at that point he wasn't. And of course, somebody in the audience was like, so tell me about LSD. And all he said was, LSD can get you in the room with God, but once it wears off, you got to figure out how to stay there yourself. And that always has stuck with me. Like, sure, we can use these things to get us in the room where we want to go, but really the true power and the true practice is the ability to get there yourself. And so we can use these tools no matter what it is, whether it's like a ceremonial plant medicine or a Healy or anything. But we gotta, and that opens the pathway and expands possibility. It lays down the template, but we gotta walk in there ourselves. And I think that's, you know, in yoga, meditation, Yoga Nidra, the practice is the workshop, but life is the reality. And so sure, I can go into a meditation and find forgiveness, but can I walk in my life and practice forgiveness in the moment when somebody unconsciously does something that hurts me? Right? Like they're not malicious in it, but I'm being triggered. Can I practice forgiveness in that moment? Because they're oblivious to it. So me not being in my forgiveness body only hurts me, right?
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the real flex, is how can you then walk this out in your life, whatever tools you're using, whether it's human design, astrology, you know, Yoga Nidra, meditation, Healy.
Yeah. I think that's really powerful. And that's always been my understanding, is these things show you the possibilities. It's remembering what you're capable of, and then it's up to you to sustain that. Right. And I think that's
100%.
just, it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
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 Thank you so much, Jana. Thank you for being here, for sharing everything. And if you want to let everyone know like where they can find you, how they can work with you, how they can do yoga nidras, all the things.
Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. So my name, Jana Roemer. And then I have Attuned to the Moon is where all my Astro Nidras are housed right now. Just attunedtothemoon.com. If anybody's on Insight Timer, you can find me on Insight Timer. It's a free app. I've got free yoga nidras on there. They're actually the original 3 Astro Nidras. So Aquarius, Taurus, and Aries are in there. Pisces, my husband recorded because I lost my voice that month. So it's not there, but they're called something else. Like it's like ground into your wisdom is Taurus, and remember who you are is Aquarius. So you can find practices on there, as well as a 10-day course called Overcome Obsessive Thinking, which should be actually called If You're Human, These Practices Are Going to Help You Human Well. Right. And then, yeah, those are the best places to find me. And on my Instagram, which is Jana_Roemer, the link tree has all those links. And I'm sure we can pop some into the.
Oh yeah, I'll have them all in the show notes. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, yeah. Thank you so
Thank
much for having me.
you. Thank
You're
you.
such a beautiful light in this world.
Thank you so much. Same to you.
Mm-hmm.